Welcome to Total Football Talk. I'm Anthony,
And I'm Eric.
and this is the college edition. So we will go ahead and talk about this. Few things went down. ASU took a big step back in a game. I knew that game was going to be close, Eric, and it was. And San Diego State won by exactly the same score as they won a year ago. Herman Edwards went for it on fourth down inside his own territory in a tie game in the fourth quarter, and San Diego State ended up scoring a touchdown. Now, there might have been some calls in that game that people view as controversial, but in the end, I don't know that you can put it all on that. So it was definitely some mistakes made on ASU's part, but as big of a setback as that was, there's another upset. I told you guys Wisconsin was overrated. Every single year, Wisconsin's in the top 10, and every single year, they're not a top 10 team. And every single year, they fall out of the top 10, and then the next year, Wisconsin's a top 10 team. Well, do top 10 teams lose games like they did last week, Eric? Consistently?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to field goal kicking, you need to hit your field goals. No excuses. I mean, you're not going to fire your kicker in college because he's on scholarship, but not like they could do in the NFL.
Yeah, no kidding.
That ended a 41 home non-conference winning streak for Wisconsin, and BYU came in and you know what, they showed no fear. They're like, we're going to come in, we're going to win, and they played with that attitude, and Wisconsin played with the let's not mess up attitude, and they messed up.
Yeah, well, that's because Wisconsin's garbage, but. I said that all along. I just don't think there's enough talent in Wisconsin for me to be sold on them. And I don't know. I mean, I don't really have a lot to say about this game. Wisconsin has a lot of problems against good teams that they're not going to be able to hide like they can against bad teams. And BYU exposed them a little bit, and I don't foresee Wisconsin winning more than 8 games this year in the regular season. So it might be a 9-win team counting the bowl, but I don't see it. I just don't think they're a very.
And Wisconsin doesn't have an easy schedule. They go to Iowa this weekend, and it's tough to play at Iowa. They actually have a decent team this year, so we expect them to give the Badgers a run. So it could be 2 losses in a row. Who knows? But I actually expect Wisconsin to right the ship, and they might be there in the end in the Big Ten championship game. But I don't know if they'll be in the college football playoff.
Well, they're not going to be. You don't know.
You never know. You never know. I mean, Alabama's locked into one. If Clemson or Georgia falter or both falter, I mean, then that opens up the door because. It looks like Ohio State's going to get in with their cupcake schedule, although they have a really tough
Wisconsin
matchup,
is going to have to. Wisconsin is going to have to get in because the only way Wisconsin gets in is if they're. They got to run the table, and they need somebody to lose twice, because even if they're going up against somebody with 1 loss, but that 1 loss isn't BYU, I'm sorry, you're not putting Wisconsin in the playoffs.
Well, if their 1 loss is a non-conference loss compared to Wisconsin beating, let's say, Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game or whatnot, Wisconsin's going to get in over Ohio State anyways.
Well, I don't know. If that's Ohio State's only loss, and they look at the resume, and let's face it, these guys that pick these bowl games, these playoff teams, they're not exactly the smartest people in the world. So.
Well, that's why they play the game. If they just pick the college football playoff, why even play game?
Well, Eric. You're preaching to the choir. Do you remember Penn State a few years ago?
Yeah, I do.
So, I mean, this is what I love is they replaced an imperfect system that people accepted with an absolutely garbage system that no one likes. And I'm talking about even before the BCS bowl game. While there was a lot of imperfections, the nice thing about that situation was you were forced to not have a cupcake schedule because it wasn't a race to number 2. It was you could theoretically be number 2 and somebody else has a better schedule and they leapfrog you and get in and end up Yeah, you could end up with split national championships, but who cares? The system that we have now, you have, we're going to play, Typewriter Institute, and we're going to play the Deaf and Blind, and Little Sisters of the Poor is our non-conference schedule. Hope we run the table in conference, and because we're in a big conference, we're in a bowl game, or we're in the championship, or we're in a playoff. What I liked about the pre-BCS era is you had Notre Dame at Oklahoma. You had Alabama versus USC in the regular season. You didn't have Alabama versus Appalachian State University in Hawaii, Wisconsin, and New Mexico with a population of 6,000 students and a team of 31. It's a problem that has gotten worse. I'm not a fan of the playoff. I've never been a fan of the playoff. And I said a long time ago you shouldn't pay players. But you know what? If you're going to give them an NFL schedule, if you're going to force these guys to play 16, 17, 14 games, then pay them. Then pay them, because you're profiting off of them all year long anyway. My solution is simple. You go to an 11-game schedule. You have your championship games to determine who's going to win the conference titles. I say bring up a few more teams and have everybody play a conference championship. And then you pick, based on the schedule and the year's performance, the top two teams can either play each other in the bowl game. That was the BCS Bowl, which I wasn't a fan of anyway. But you let them play. Look, the Big Ten plays the Pac-12 in the Rose Bowl. And if that happens to be 1 versus 2, great. If it happens to be 1 versus 3 and 2 is Virginia Tech and they lose the Orange Bowl to Alabama and Alabama was 4, then let the debate begin. That was part of the fun. And ultimately you're left with the same decision process, although at least now you have a schedule to look at, than you are right now when you're looking at who's going to make the playoffs. And I love how they go strength of schedule matters. Strength of schedule doesn't matter. Strength of schedule mattered. Oklahoma and Alabama, for that matter, would never make the playoff. And I'm saying that as an Alabama fan. Strength of schedule means about as much as a wet fart in a toilet bowl. Wet farts in your pants, totally different animal. So anyway, sorry for the gross analogy first thing in the morning, but that was my little mini rant about the system that we have in play. And if Wisconsin makes the playoffs, there's really no way I can take college football seriously. Not the playoff system, at least. Because you lose to BYU at home, I don't care if you run the table. There's going to be other one-loss teams that have a better resume. And why do you make the bowl? Because you played in the Big Ten? Which, in my opinion, is one of the softest divisions in all of football?
Well, yeah, I agree with that, and that's why I think that they would need to beat Ohio State, and Michigan would need to falter for them to even get consideration and get in.
Yeah, I know. I was just going on a rant. Anyway.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame.
Talk about getting out to a 16-3 lead at the half and then only winning by 5. Okay, so Brandon Wimbush, I'm going to give you his numbers. 13 for 23, 122 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, 84 yards of rushing, 1 touchdown. No fumbles either, so he didn't have a turnover, which is good news for Notre Dame. But, again, they played stagnant. They let Vanderbilt come in, back in the game. Okay, and Vanderbilt's not that bad of a football program right now. So, in the fourth quarter, Notre Dame scored a touchdown, but they went for 2 and didn't make it. That would have put them up 7 in case Vandy got the ball back and scored. Ian Book, 3 for 3, 13 yards and 1 touchdown. Ian Book is now the starter at Notre Dame, and Brandon Wimbush is on the sideline.
That's the way it should be.
Right now they're playing at Wake Forest.
Yeah.
Wake Forest is in Notre Dame territory right now, and it's just under 9 minutes to go in the first quarter, no score. So Brian Kelly is trying to inject some life into this Notre Dame Fighting Irish offense because they have not scored over 24 points in a game yet this year.
Well, and Wimbush has never been the answer. Wimbush, for me, showed exactly what he was capable of against Miami. At that point, you should have made the quarterback change then. But Kelly doesn't know how to coach. He's an idiot, and he's going to do what he's going to do, and for whatever reason, Notre Dame won't fire him. So, I would have...
If he keeps winning 8, 9, 10 games every year, going to a bowl game, I mean, I know there needs to be time for a change at some point, but who knows when that's going to be.
Yeah, Eric, the problem with that is this is Notre Dame. Their expectations. And I don't want to hear that those expectations have been tempered over the years. They've been tempered because of their inability in the front office to make the right move and get the right coach. Jumbo Fisher was out there to be had. That's one guy you could have gotten.
Do you think Jimbo Fisher's that good of a coach?
I think Jimbo Fisher, having this kind of talent, could do better than Kelly. Yes. Do I think he's the answer? No. But I am a firm believer that you don't fire a coach unless you can find somebody who's better. And Jimbo Fisher is better than Kelly. Sleeping, he's better than Kelly. So,
I mean, if you look at it that way, they could have had Kevin Sumlin too. I mean, he's doing great at U of A. And that's being facetious.
I know you are. I don't think Tumlin is better than, and I didn't think he was better than Kelly anyway.
Okay, with the side, and I'm going to throw another one at you here regarding Jimbo Fisher. Would you have paid him that much money to coach at Notre Dame that A&M paid him?
No. You look at him and you say we're Notre Dame. That's Texas A&M. They have to pay you that much money to get you to come here. We're Notre Dame.
Yeah, but Texas A&M can get a heck of a lot better recruits than Notre Dame can with their admissions process.
Well, Eric, I would argue that point. Notre Dame used to get the best athletes in all of the world because it was Notre Dame. And when you can put on your resume that you coached at Alabama and that you know how to get guys into the pros, you can bypass a lot of the reluctancy of the talent coming into Notre Dame. Not to mention Notre Dame's been relevant again for a while. Yes, they have tougher admissions problems. So does Stanford.
Yeah, and Stanford does well every year.
That's right. So, it is an education-first school, and that's important. That's the way it should be. I'm not a fan of the way Alabama does it. I'm not a fan of the way Michigan does it. I'm not a fan of the way Texas A&M does it, and a lot of colleges for that matter. I like Notre Dame's method. I like Stanford's ideology. So, there's another game that I want to talk about that's going on right now that I don't have access to at the moment, and that's Maine. The Maine Black Bears, for those of you that don't know, impressive this year. Beat Western Kentucky in Kentucky, beat New Hampshire, who was an 11-win team last year and made it to the semifinals in the FCS football tournament. They're rivals, and they went into New Hampshire and they beat them 35-7. It's the biggest blowout New Hampshire's had on opening day in over 22 years. And then they go into Western Kentucky, an FBS school, and they beat them 31-28. This week they're playing back in the FCS, an opponent that they should handle, but I'm very curious to see how the Black Bears are going to do this year.
They're at Central Michigan.
That's right. They're at Central Michigan. That's an FBS school as well. So, do you have the access to the score right now?
Actually starts 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Oh, it said 9 o'clock on my phone. It must have been an error. Anyway, see how they do. NAU's pretty much done. Idaho, the drop down seems to have favored them. They're 2-1 this year. And they're 2-0 in FCS. So I kind of figured that would be a big upgrade. We had a fan that wanted to know a little bit about, why, our story at ASU as far as when we followed them. We were there when ASU made it to the Holiday Bowl in 2002. We were there for Terrell Suggs. I saw that you comment on that. As far as Georgia history, the Georgia Bulldogs history is not great. I mean, it's consistent, but it's not great. I mean, Herschel Walker, the national title in 1980, they came darn close last year. But the Bulldogs are one of those teams that are just like Clemson for a while, just consistently good, an occasional championship, but in the end, it is what it is, right, Eric?
Yeah, and I Georgia's actually going to get better. Jake Fromm was just a freshman last year, leading that team to the national championship game. Coming out, Georgia's defense has been really, really good. They're playing at Missouri right now. They have a 6-0 lead. But I wouldn't be surprised if they go to 2 or 3 more playoffs and even get to another championship game.
I mean,
what they do with that experience, with Fromm's experience, is remains to be seen. But they got to get there first. But I think they have a really good chance.
Well, and I tell you, there's a couple elements of this football team that I think are interesting, and not just in Georgia, but in college football landscape in general. So for those of you that don't know, I mean, Alabama, Notre Dame, Miami, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, who am I forgetting? Penn State, Florida State. These are teams that were perennial powers year in and year out. USC was another one, Ohio State, Michigan. It seems to be a changing of the guard. And right now, the more consistent teams seem to be Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State. But there's a lot of history in college football that I know and don't know and can't give. Penn State is a team that looked really good last night that I think is going to be a real threat for a playoff. If I'm picking a playoff right now, I'm probably going – I'm not going to do that. It's too early, but Penn State's definitely got to be in the conversation. And I think they're every bit as good as 3 of the 4 teams in it. I just don't know if anybody beats Alabama this year. And we'll find out how they do against Texas A&M, but man, that offense is something different.
Yeah, they play an NFL-style defense. They're just like an NFL, in my opinion. I mean, they got Texas A&M today, and I don't know what else to say about them. I mean, they're head and shoulders above everybody else right now.
Yeah. Now you can.
I really don't know what else there more is to say about Alabama unless we start seeing a hiccup from them, or Tua starts playing down towards Jalen Hurts level, which I don't see happening.
No.
Or Tua gets injured and we got to talk about that. But Alabama's on a level of their own.
How many have they won in a row now? 2?
Well, they didn't lose last year.
Huh?
I don't know their current winning streak.
I think they've won 2 in a row. I'm talking about championships.
Oh, championships. No, last year they beat Georgia and then they lost to Clemson.
No, they beat Clemson the year before they lost to Clemson. Or is that the other way around? That's right.
No, they beat Clemson and they lost to Clemson.
Okay. And then prior to that, they were in it every year, it seemed. So, I mean, this is a dynasty. So, I could understand people saying, well, this is getting old, but it is only a decade old. It's not like New England. But the thing with college football is usually these teams like Alabama and Notre Dame, they're not good for 10 years. They're good for 20, 30 years. So once you kind of have a system that works, as long as a coach is willing to stay there, you're going to have yourself a run. So all I can say is get used to it, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else there is to say. Any other games you want to talk about?
Yeah, let's run quickly through the scoreboard. Boise State really didn't put up much of a fight against Oklahoma State. The only other game that I want to touch on really quick is the Ohio State TCU game. This game was really good through halftime and even through the third quarter. At halftime, it was 14-13 TCU, and then Ohio State was up 33-28. And then TCU didn't score in the fourth quarter, while Ohio State put up a score. This game was back and forth quite a bit throughout the entire game. But one big injury to Ohio State In the second half, Nick Bosa, the younger brother of Chargers defensive end Joey Bosa, he actually left the game with an injury. He had core muscle surgery, and he is out indefinitely, and that's going to be a big hit to Ohio State. But I don't really think they're gonna miss much in their defense until they play next week at Penn State or against Penn State at home. They got Tulane this week, and so they're probably going to route that like 63-10 or something.
Yeah.
But to me, that's a big loss on defense. He was probably one of the top 3 for defensive player of the year, and now with him out, he's still put up great numbers this year. But with him out, Ohio State defense may lose a step or so. But their offense is clicking on all cylinders right now. They have a really good run game. Dwayne Haskins has been, keeping the ball on Ohio State side, taking care of the football is what I should say. Threw for 344 yards and 2 touchdowns last week against the TCU defense that, has to lick his wounds and travel to Austin and take on a tough Texas team who upset USC. If you could really call it an upset, because USC is kind of in the toilet, even though they came back and beat Washington State. When you have to say you come back and beat Washington State on a Friday night, you have bigger problems.
Yeah.
So that's really all that I have regarding those games last week. As far as games this week, we can get into that. I think there's some big games going on this week that we should really touch on.
Go ahead and get into it.
Well, I'm going to start with a Big Ten game up in Ann Arbor, and Nebraska is at the Wolverines. And the Wolverines are ranked 19th, and Nebraska has lost 4 straight games going back to last year for what seems like the first time in a while. The whispers regarding Scott Frost as the head coach are now starting to become inside voices and not whispers, how he needs to get a win in Nebraska, and people are going crazy in Lincoln. UCF is still doing obviously really well. There's Josh Heupel, old Oklahoma quarterback. Josh Heupel is the head coach at UCF, and he's got them playing really well. Actually, they got canceled last week because of the hurricane. They were supposed to play up in the Carolinas. But Nebraska really needs to right the ship. I mean, people are going to go crazy in Lincoln. It's going to be a long season if he can't get a win anytime soon. And, I mean, he needs to go up to Michigan and somehow, some way, come out of a win there. Because he's getting inconsistent quarterback play, and Michigan is semi-ripe for the picking after beating a SMU team who really shouldn't count anyways.
Well, I'm going to touch on this briefly. First of all, new first-year coaches who used to be players or hot coordinators, I don't give much credence in year one. They tend to do well. Look at Lane Kiffin. Okay? Totally different animal in year 2. So that's one. In reference to Nebraska, until they're back in the Big 12, I'm not talking about Nebraska. They have not been relevant since leaving, and I don't think they'll be relevant until they go back. They're not what they used to be. And like Alabama, when they fell off the wagon in 79 and 80 and were never heard from again until the early 90s, that's Nebraska State right now. The state of Nebraska is abysmal because they're not hiring the right coaches. I think they need to fire Tom Osborne as the AD. I don't think he's the answer. I don't care that he's their all-time winning coach. Being an AD is not being a head coach. And his people have been garbage. And for as bad as Bob Pelini was last year, he's better than Scott Frost. So I just think Nebraska's got to get out of the Big Ten or the Big 56, whatever the hell amount of teams are in that conference, and get themselves back in the Big 12, get their rivals back in line, and start playing Nebraska football. It's really that easy of a fix. But, you know, it is what it is.
There's no way Nebraska leads the Big Ten.
Why?
I just don't see it happening. I mean, Nebraska's a big school. I mean, where are they going to go? The Big 12?
Yeah. That's where all their rivals are.
I think they're more lucrative in the Big Ten.
You have to win to be lucrative, Eric.
Yeah, well, I know, and they're down 14-0 in the first quarter right now to the Wolverines, but I get it. I get that you got to win to do it, and I think Frost will get them there. But until they get there, he's not a bad coach.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. He was a quarterback, and the one position that is killing him right now is the position he played. So not only is he a bad head coach, but he's not even a good quarterback's coach.
He inherited Taylor Martinez. What's he gonna do?
You have Eric. Stop. I'm gonna talk to you as a coach. When I took over a high school team.
Adrian Martinez. My apologies.
When I took over a high school team, not a college team. Okay, a high school team. I inherited the entire team. They were senior heavy. In one summer, I took a 2-7 team and I turned them into an 8-2 team. My offense, which I was in charge of, the year before, they were averaging around 20 points a game. When I came in, they upped that to 39 points a game. And that was in high school. You're in college at Nebraska in the Big Ten. If you can't turn that athlete into a competent quarterback, and that was the position you played, and that's the position you supposedly can coach, and that performance is what you get after an entire offseason of working with him, then you turn around and you look at his play calling or lack thereof through the course of the season. Yeah, Frost is not a good coach. I'm sorry. He's not. And if that's the qualification for good coach, then I should be a Hall of Famer in the NCAA. Just saying.
Okay, I mean, let's give him after this year to see what he can do. Typically, it's 3 years like you've always said.
I agree, but the nice thing about coaching is you can tell early on. What do they do in the crunch? You know, it's one thing when you make the right call and your guys don't execute. It's another thing when you call a passing play on 3rd and 1 and a goddamn running play on 3rd and 15. That's a whole nother animal that you're looking at. Coaching, you could tell because you see improvement in the team. Do you see improvement from Nebraska? Forget the wins and losses, just in the play. It's a problem. So
yeah, I don't have an answer for that except for no.
Yeah. So I mean, coaching's not playing. You know, playing you have a learning curve. There's things you have to figure out. You've got to get comfortable with the offense. You've got to get comfortable with the guys around you. You've got to get comfortable with the coach. As a coach, your job in the entire offseason is to get the team to buy into your system and articulate it in a way that they can at least execute on a competent level. By this time of the year, you're going into conference play next week, your crap should be figured out. You should start to see headway. You shouldn't be down 14-0 to a team that you're capable of beating in the first quarter.
Make it 21-0.
Oh, Jesus. You're just making my point for me, Eric, at this point.
I'm sorry. Actually, 20-0. They missed the extra point.
Oh, well, that's an epidemic going on. All right, what else do you want to talk about?
ASU is going to Washington to take on Jake Browning and the Huskies.
Upset alert.
Yeah, I'm not. Washington's ranked 10 in the country, and I am not impressed with what I've seen from them. You know, they've had one loss, and that was the one team that the hardest team that they've played. The other two games have been pretty much cupcakes.
Yeah.
So The only guy you really have to watch and tackle and wrap up and take him to the ground and do whatever is Myles Gaskin.
Yeah.
Listen, you could get a pass rush on Browning. He lost his left tackle. I said this the first or second college show. Okay, left tackle for the year. They are weak on the left side. Load it up.
Yeah.
And then make sure you got your linebackers who are able to tackle Myles Gaskin. Because if you let him get out in the open, he's gone. He's got 271 rush yards on the year with 2 touchdowns.
What you do in this game if you're ASU is you put your number one tackling safety on him. You follow him around. You overload the left side, and you blitz 44% of the time, but you show blitz 100% of the time. You confuse Browning. You force him to think he needs to dump it. You jump the dump routes when you have your lone safety play deep coverage on the overload side, because you know that's where Browning's going to go, thinking he's got you beat on a blitz. Now that leaves you vulnerable. You're one-on-one with your corner on the other side, but until they make that happen, that's the system you run defensively. Offensively, you need to run the ball. I understand.
Get N'Keal Harry involved early.
But you can do that with screens. But you can do that with screens, quick slants, ins, outs.
Oh yeah. I'm not saying just go deep.
Yeah.
There's obviously more to it. Let him use his size. Let him win a jump ball.
Yeah. Agreed. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I'll be interested in watching this game, and I won't be shocked if ASU wins. And if they win, I think they could easily sneak back into the top 25.
Oh, they will. And I'll tell you something else. If San Diego State wins this week, you may see the Aztecs on the outside of the top 25, but just barely. Especially if ASU wins.
Possible.
Especially if ASU wins.
Yeah.
So I think San Diego State's a top 25 team this year anyway. Our defense is legit. So we'll see if this loss is one that ends up hurting ASU, or in the end people look back and go, and their only loss was to like the 12th ranked team in the state or country, or the 15th ranked team in the country. So we'll see where San Diego State ends up, but I could easily see them in the top 20, bottom half of the top 25 at the end of the year, if not, 18s, 19, 17, somewhere in that range when all is said and done. They got a talented team. I said that last week. It's a battle of the teams that look like Tarzan but play like Jane. Every year you look at these rosters on ASU and San Diego State and you're like, oh my God, these guys are for real. And then for whatever reason, the play doesn't add up. We'll see if that changes this year, but I definitely think they're more than capable. I don't have anything else to add, E. Do you?
Yeah, actually, one last game, and I'm only going to touch on it because I want to get your thoughts on the opposing quarterback in this game, and it's Texas A&M and Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Your thoughts on Kellen Mond and how he's looked to you in the last couple of weeks, especially that game against Clemson? Well,
he's a good quarterback. And in college football, you can win a lot of games on your own. I don't know. I will know more about him after this game. I'm not necessarily looking for him to make it close, but I want to see how he handles a really complex defense, how he navigates that offense in obvious situations, how he tries to motivate his team. More importantly, I'm curious to see what he's like when his team is down, emotionally on the sidelines. There's a lot of things to a quarterback that I look for as a coach. Communicator, leader, calm, fiery. And that may sound odd to you, but you need to have fire at the right times and you need to be calm at the right times. Now, I don't necessarily want him to be an extension of me. I want him to be opposite of me because I'm very emotional and I'm all over the place and I need a stabilizer, and that should be the quarterback. Now, that's me, right? If I'm not an emotional, basically a cartoon character on the sidelines, then I want my guy to be like a Phillip Rivers. All the time, into it, passionate, good to go. I'm curious to see how he handles his sidelines through the course of this game, especially if it gets ugly. Um, and is he able to get him back in the game? Because look, the final score of this game could very well be like a 35-21 game, or 35-7, 42-14, or it could be 38, 38-31, or 39-30. And if that's the case, is there a moment where they're behind big and he leads a mini comeback and gets them back in the game? Now, these are the kinds of things I'm going to be looking for. So I don't have a real assessment on him yet. The short answer, I like what I've seen so far, but I need to see a lot more. Fair?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, your thoughts on Mond and should Alabama be on any type of upset alert today? I know it's at home. I know they're coming off a tough loss. Texas A&M was against Clemson, and it could give them say, hey, if we can play with Clemson, we should be able to play with Alabama. But I think Alabama is a little bit different than Clemson.
A lot different.
Exactly. And so I don't know. I'll be interested to watch this game because I think it'll be close for a little while, and then
I was just gonna say that.
Second half it could definitely change.
I was just gonna say that it could be close by halftime, but by the third, fourth quarter, this game is over.
Yeah.
So no. I don't think this is an upset alert. Now I've been wrong before, but I would be very surprised. Alabama's just that good, unfortunately, for everyone else. Great for me, but not for everyone else. So, yeah, I can't think of anything else. I'm good. Are you good?
I'm good as well.
All right. So here's the deal, guys. Next week, when we cover college football, we'll break down these games. We'll have about 3 games each that me and Eric are going to cover, because I think next week with conference play, there's always more. It used to not be that way. It used to be these first 3 weeks were the most exciting weeks in college football. And then you got into your conference and you kind of knew who was what going in. But because everybody plays such a weak schedule outside of conference, you have to wait till you get to conference play before you really have your matchups that you're curious about. So we'll see how that shapes out. So I'll have 3 games. Eric will have 3 games. And we'll cover ASU and Notre Dame. Those are guaranteed coverage.
Yeah, and I'll go into a little bit more regarding Ian Book as well and how he has looked today. Let's just say that he's made maybe one spectacular throw that I don't think Winbush would have done, but there's still 3 quarters left to go, and I'll have a more in-depth on Book and how he's handled the offense.
Well, and I think we'll know more about these teams too moving forward, and we could really start talking, crux of it. The other thing that I want to do next week is get into a little bit of history. I'll pick a team. Eric will pick a team. We'll talk about their tradition and their history as an organization, and then we'll wrap up the show. So, I'm Anthony,
and I'm Eric,
and this is Total Football Talk College Edition. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and Fork 'em Devils.
Fork 'em Devils, baby.
Late.